Welcome and good evening. This is our second webinar in this financial year of 2021-2022. Today our topic is analysis of changes in statute relating to reassessment by Finance Act 2021, and our honorable speaker is CA Ramesh Kumar Patodia. This topic has gained more importance due to some recent orders of Honorable High Courts staying the reassessment proceedings under Section 148 with Section 148A in respect of notices issued post 31st March 2021. Mr. Patodia will take us through the gamut of all the changes. I would like to mention here that next Friday, that is 23rd July 21, same time we will be holding another webinar, and it will be related to Companies Act. Our convener, CA Indu Chattar, will give the details. Without wasting any more time, I will hand over the proceedings to CA Indu Chattar. Thank you. Indu, please come in.
Thank you, Anand. And good evening to every participant who is attached to this webinar. This is a very burning topic, and most of our practitioners as well as the assessees are facing a lot of problems. At the present date, the applicability of two sets of laws for the same purpose of issuing notices and reopening of assessments has left income tax assessees bewildered and the practitioners peeved. And with these few words, I would request our President, CA Manish, to address the gathering. Thank you. Over to Manish.
Very good evening to all the participants, and good evening to Patodia ji. He's a very learned speaker, and as rightly pointed out by convener Indu Chattar ji, a lot of disputes have arisen before the proceedings have initiated. Several assessees have moved high courts by way of writ, and in most of the cases stay have been granted, but the fate of those writs are not yet clear. So I am sure all the participants must be willing to know what is going to be the fate and what should be the course of action to be suggested to the clients, whether to go for writs at this stage or maybe at the later stage, or follow the normal remedial measures available to them in the Income Tax Act. So without wasting any further time, I'd request Induda to introduce Ramesh ji, and we start the session.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my privilege to read and introduce Ramesh Kumar Patodia. See, Ramesh Kumar Patodia is in practice as a chartered accountant in Kolkata for last 34 years and has been practicing mainly in consulting and litigations in the field of direct taxes and indirect taxes, FEMA, etc. He is a regular speaker at the several professional organizations and is also a regular contributor to various publications by way of articles on professional topics. He has also written several books on professional topics, including commentary on Hindu undivided family and a complete guide to the reinvestment under Section 148 of the Income Tax Act. This was released during one of the meetings of Association of Corporate Advisors of Executives, of which he is a very active member. He is also the co-chairman of the Tax Council of ASSOCHAM, Eastern Region. As I stated earlier, he is a dedicated member of the Association of Corporate Advisors and Executives, and he is also a trustee of Shri Rani Sati Ji Mandir, Junjunu, and Gayatri Foundation, Kolkata. With these few words, I have introduced Ramesh ji, and I would now request him to deliver on the burning topic, analysis of changes in statute relating to reassessments by Finance Act 2021. Thank you. Ramesh ji, aap shuru kijiye.
Thank you, Induda. Thank you.
Ramesh ji, excuse me.
Yes, sir.
Just, I will take the 30 seconds. The question answers will be taken by CA Kaushik Monle. He is a past president of our library. So I think the question and answers, you will take it at the end or during the program. What do you prefer?
No, I think let us take it at the end.
Right, sir.
Only
Right,
thing
sir.
is,
That is best. That is best, sir.
you please let me know. Question answer will be of how much duration, so that I will
Okay.
stop my deliberation accordingly.
Okay. So that depends on the number of questions we get, sir. Sir, Kaushik
Okay.
will be in touch with you and let you know.
No
Okay,
issue.
sir.
No
Thank you,
issue.
sir. Sorry, sir. Please continue.
No
sir.
issue. Thank you, Induda, for introducing me, getting introduced at your by you is a great privilege for me, Induda. I think it would have been, I think, the other way. I should have done it. So, nevertheless, thank you, sir, Mr. Anindranath Chatterjee. Thank you, Sanjay Da, for being there. And President Mr. Manish Tiwari, always smiling. Mr. Devayan and other members of Accountants Library, a great organization, sitting right there at the Income Tax Aikar Bhavan. Friends, this when Induda said that we will be dealing with the burning topic of reassessment, I think that the fire that 148 has generated is not a new fire, I will say, because the reassessment fire has always been there. If you see the history of last 100 years of income tax, right from the 1922 Act, we are in the year 2021. In any of the income tax reports, I think you will find not less than 5, 7, 10 judgments on reassessment. And right from the case of Calcutta discount reported in 41 ITR, when Constitution Bench delivered a landmark judgment, which was followed last year by Honorable Supreme Court in the New Delhi television's case. The reassessment has always been in the forefront, friends. And the reasons are obvious. Nobody likes to be scrutinized again and again. Once you have done your part of scrutinizing the return or deciding not to scrutinize the return, if you want to revisit the things again, then obviously everybody is worried. But here I must say, friends, that we are fortunate in India that this budget has prescribed a limitation of 3 years, initial limitation of 3 years, and the extended limitation of 10 years. Because why I'm saying so? Because if you compare this with legislation prevailing in other parts of the world, the developed countries like USA and UK, in USA there is no limitation. You will be surprised to hear that if there is a escapement of income on account of any fraud, then Mr. President of America can go even 100 years back and reassess you and collect the taxes. Same is with UK, where the discovery assessment, as they call it, can be done for 20 years, up to 20 years. So we are fortunate, I will say, that the limitation is rather 3 years or 10 years, as the case may be. Now, friends, the Finance Act of 2021 has changed the
पटोदिया के দেখা যাচ্ছে
entire law.
पटोदिया की স্ক্রিনে দেখা যাচ্ছে
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ আমি তো দেখতে পাচ্ছি সামনেই রয়েছে
Sir, please unmute yourself. Sir, there is Ramesh sir, please unmute yourself.
I'm sorry. So could you, I'm sorry, was I audible or not from
Yes,
the beginning?
you were audible so far, only just 20 seconds.
Okay, no issue. So friends, before I begin to deal with the changed provisions, I will briefly touch upon what the provisions were under the earlier law. Earlier law, as all of us are aware, the reassessment notices could have been issued ordinarily for a period up to 6 years from the end of the assessment year. And there also, there was 2 brackets. First bracket was up to 4 years, and the second bracket was 4 years, more than 4 years, but up to 6 years. And there also, based on the income, that if it is up to 1 lakh or above 1 lakh. So up to 1 lakh, the maximum period within which the reassessment could have been done was 4 years from the end of the assessment year. And it was only when the income escaping assessment was more than 1 lakh that you could have gone up to 6 years. And then in certain cases of foreign income involvement, the time limit was prescribed as 16 years under the existing law. And under the existing law, friends, the entire law was based on the concept of reason to believe. That if the assessing officer has reason to believe that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment, then he could have issued notice under section 148 to you. And prior to issuing the notice under section 148 of the Income Tax Act under the earlier law, it was required that the assessing officer would take approval of the sanctioning authority as is specified in section 151 of the Income Tax Act, where there were certain parameters that up to 4 years, who has passed the order, based on that, the procedure for taking sanction was prescribed. And the earlier law had the occasion to interpret the law for last 100 years in various landmark cases, friends, like Calcutta discount, as I told you, 41 ITR, page 191. Then Calvinator's case, 320 ITR, page 561. Rajesh Javeri. Then there have been Hindustan Liver's case, Bombay High Court. There are this 106 ITR. There is one landmark decision of Supreme Court. So there are landmark decisions of various courts in the context of the earlier law. Why I'm saying that a question will arise whether those landmark decisions are now redundant for us or whether they still hold the field. So friends, when I have studied the entire changed law and applied my mind towards that, I think that it is not that judgment have been, in fact, the judgments and reassessment have still not, except few judgments like which have dealt with the reason to believe, because the new law has changed the way the reassessment notices will be issued. I'll come to that, friends. So now, with this little background, I'll come to the straight away to section 147 of the new law, friends. Section 147 to 153 of the Act, which was dealing with the reassessment under the old law, continues to deal with the reassessment under the new law also. The sections remain the same, except that a new section 148 capital A has been introduced in the statute book. That is an altogether new section which has been introduced. And another section 151 capital A was introduced by the Taxation and Other Laws Relaxation of Certain Provisions Act 2020 with effect from 1st of November 2020. That is prior to the present changes. One section 151 capital A was introduced in the Income Tax Act. And basically that section was introduced with a view to faceless assessment of income to ensure the forward 151A were introduced as back as in the month of September 2020 during the Corona period with effect from 1st of November 2020. And in the Finance Act of 2021, while making major amendment to the existing provisions of section 147 to 151, a small amendment was made in section 151A also, which enabled the government to introduce the faceless issuance of so-called notices under section 148 capital A, which I just now told you, faceless inquiry. So basically this in the section 151A takes care of the faceless part of the reassessment. Now friends, section 147 of the Income Tax Act, the earlier provision, the language was, if the assessing officer has reason to believe that any income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment for any assessment year, he may, subject to the provisions of section 148 to 153, assess or reassess, and also any other income chargeable to tax which has escaped assessment. This was the language of the earlier section 147. Now what is the new 147 says? If any income chargeable to tax in the case of an assessee has escaped assessment for any assessment year, the assessing officer may, subject to the provisions of 148 to 153. So this part that is subject to 148 to 153 has been kept in the new 147 also. This is important, friends. I'll come to that. Assess or reassess. So this is 147. I have briefly told you. There is one explanation introduced to section 147 of the new law. What does it say? It is important. It says, for the purpose of assessment or reassessment or recomputation under this section, the assessing officer may assess or reassess the income in respect of any issue which has escaped assessment, and such issue comes to his notice subsequently in the course of proceedings under this section, irrespective of the fact that the provision of section 148A have not been complied with. So friends, the new law gives power to the assessing officer to reopen the assessment without requiring him to have any reason to believe, which was there under the earlier law. The concept of reason to believe has been thrown away. Now under the new law, the reassessment is based on information, which part is contained in section 148 of the Income Tax Act. What does it say? It says that before making the assessment under the subject to the provisions of section 148A, the assessing officer shall serve on the assessee a notice along with the copy of the order passed under section 148A. Now friends, what does the new law says? That before you begin any reassessment proceeding, the assessing officer in most of the cases will be required to initiate a process of inquiry as per section 148A. And before beginning that inquiry, he would be required to take approval of the specified authority which is given in section 151 of the Income Tax Act. 151 deals with two-tier authorities. The first tier is, if the reassessment is up to 3 years, then the approving authority is Principal Commissioner of Income Tax. And if it is beyond 3 years up to 10 years, then it is Principal Chief Commissioner of Income Tax. So, friends, before any reassessment proceeding can begin, the process of inquiry has to be there. And that inquiry also cannot be done unless the approval of this authority is taken based on the year to which the reassessment relates. And we can see that the approving authority is fairly higher in the rank as far as hierarchy of the CBDT is concerned, because in the income tax authority, which is defined in section 116 of the Income Tax Act, after Central Board of Direct Taxes, the next authority is Principal Chief Commissioner of Income Tax. So, Principal Chief Commissioner of Income Tax. So fairly, this is the government wants to give a message that we are fairly serious and we do not want that the income tax officer should exercise the power of reassessment without any genuine reason. So once he will have some material that he wants to conduct an inquiry, he will initiate the process of inquiry with the approval of the authorities as specified. And after having done the inquiry, when he is satisfied that there exists some material for reassessment, he will issue a so-cause notice to the particular assessee. And that so-cause notice also has to be issued with the approval again. Before issuing the so-cause, notwithstanding that inquiry was done with the approval, the so-cause notice also has to be preceded by the approval of the specified authority, which I just now said. And in the so-cause notice, the assessing officer will give the result of the inquiry and will call for explanation from the assessee that why his assessment should not be reopened. And he will give a time limit as prescribed in section 148A of the Income Tax Act, which can be extended. Minimum 7 days time, maximum 30 days time will be given, but it can be extended if required. If the assessee wants it to be extended, it will be extended by a reasonable time. So after you have received the so-cause notice, you are supposed to reply to the so-cause notice that what are the objections basically. In the context of the earlier law, friends, when the Honorable Supreme Court in GK and Drivesaf 259 ITR had laid down the procedure to be followed by the assessees once he received the notice under section 148. In the context of the earlier law, the Honorable Supreme Court had said that once you receive the notice under section 148, you have to file the return. Once you file the return, you can ask for the reasons recorded in writing. After getting the reasons recorded in writing, you could have filed your objections to the regions. And once you had filed the objections to the region, then the assessing officer had no alternative but to pass an order on objections. And once he had passed the order on objection, then the assessee could have approached the writ court challenging the issuance of the notice under section 148. And thereafter, the process of assessment could begin. This was basically the law in the context of earlier provisions, which I think to some extent has been, the GK and Drivesaf case has been incorporated in the new section 148A. Because here, before the issuance of notice under section 148, the assessee is being given an opportunity by giving him the so-cause notice that, look, I'm going to reassess you, and these are the reasons on which I'm going to rely. If you have anything to say, you can put forward your defense. And on the basis of that so-cause notice, the assessee is supposed to reply. Once he replies to the so-cause notice, thereafter the assessing officer will decide that whether it is a fit case for issuance of notice under section 148. And if he so decides, then he will issue a notice under section 148 of the Income Tax Act. That too again with the approval of the specified authority under section 151 of the Income Tax Act. And once the notice under section 148 is issued, thereafter you will be required to file the return of your income, and thereafter the process of reassessment will begin under the new law. Here a question arises, friends, that whether now that the so-called notice, the inquiry precedes the issue of notice under section 148. So is there any relevance of GK and Drivesafe's case now? When I have given a thought to it, friends, in my opinion, the major portion of the GK and Drivesafe's case has been taken over by the by giving you the opportunity to reply to the so-called notice. However, friends, insofar as defect in the notice under section 148 itself is concerned, because you will find that invariably in the notice under section 148 which is issued, in the context of earlier law, there are plethora of decisions where notice has been defective. The notice was not signed, unsigned notice. The assessment year in the notice was wrongly mentioned. The notice was not dated, undated notice. 2 assessment years were mentioned. The notice did not strike the relevant portion which should have been struck. These were the defects in notice which were taken note of by the courts of law. And in most of the cases, the courts have come down upon heavily. And on these grounds also, the courts have struck down the notice. Suppose the notice was issued in the name of a dead person. Savita Kapila, 426 ITR, Delhi High Court recently struck down a notice under section 148 because the notice was issued in the name of a person who had died. And the department contended that, look, my lords, we didn't have the information that the person died. The Delhi High Court said that, look, under the Income Tax Act, there is no provision whereby the SSC is required to intimate the department about the death of a person. So therefore, they refused to buy that argument. And the notice having been issued in the name of a dead person was struck down as invalid. So friends, I can foresee a situation where under the new law, when the notice under section 148 is issued, along with the order which is passed under section 148A of the Income Tax Act, while you had the opportunity of giving your objections to the so-called notice which was issued, but you did not had any opportunity, or you have not been given any opportunity to put forward your objection to the defects in the notice itself, which is issued under section 148. So to that extent, friends, I will say that the GK and Drivesafe case can serve as a guidance, even in respect of the new law. Once you receive the notice under section 148A, 148 along with the order under section 148A under the new law, then the question arises, what is to be done? Friends, the order which is passed under section 148A is not an appealable order. There is no appeal prescribed. So obviously, friends, when there is no appeal prescribed against an order under section 148A, the question of alternative remedy cannot arise. And I think therefore, to that extent, when the writ petition is filed against an order under section 148A, the courts will not be refusing to entertain the writ on the pretext of the alternative remedy. You can challenge the notice under section 148 along with order under section 148A before a writ court, putting forward your arguments that why the reassessment is invalid, why the notice which is being issued is invalid. All the defenses can be taken before the writ court in appropriate cases, friends. Because in all cases, I will not advise that the writ court should be approached. As all of us know, when you approach the writ court, friends, you will be filing your writ before a single bench of the High Court, and whereafter the matter can go to division bench, and finally it gets settled by the Supreme Court. So therefore, unless the matter demands that kind of litigation, one should not straight away venture into filing a writ. In appropriate cases where the matter is higher stakes are there, in those cases, obviously one should definitely file a writ petition before the jurisdictional high court in such cases, friends. And here, while putting forward objections to the 148A order which has been received, one can put grievances related to notice also. If there is any defect in the notice, then those defects can also be put forward before the court by challenging the notice. And I am hopeful that in appropriate cases, the court will not court will definitely strike down the notice as well as the order under section 148A, friends. There is some noise, I think. Induda, can they be unmuted? There is some.
It's a request.
Ranjita, please unmute yourself, please.
Sorry.
So friends, this is the very basic provision under the new law. Now here, friends, I will touch upon one important change which has been, so to say, silently made by the finance minister. Honorable FM has silently, so to say, made the change. Is that what under the earlier provisions, if during the course of an reassessment, the assessing officer found that there was one more item on which reassessment could be done, which has escaped assessment, the assessing officer could assess that item. However, there are several decisions, including that of Bombay High Court in the famous case of Jet Airways, where Justice D.Y. Chandrachud, as he was then, now Justice Chandrachud is adoring Supreme Court, had interpreted the provisions of the earlier law that if an assessing officer wants to make an addition of an item which is not subject of reasons recorded in writing, then unless the original item for which reasons were recorded is added in the assessment order, the addition on account of the new item cannot be made. That is the way the law was interpreted by the courts in the context of earlier provisions. Now what has happened, friends, is Section 147 of the Income Tax Act has been worded in such a manner under the new law, which is being interpreted that in the context of new law, even if the original item in the pursuance of which the reassessment was initiated is not added, the assessing officer will be in a position to make an addition of an item for which the process which I just now said was not undertaken. Friends, here I have some difference of opinion. And in my humble submission, even though the language of Section 147 has been reworded, in spite of that, friends, in order to make the addition of an item which is not there in the original inquiry or original 148A order which is being issued, it would be difficult for the assessing officer to make an addition simply of the new item. Why I am saying so, friends? Because you see, the new Section 147 has an explanation which says that for the purpose of assessment, the assessing officer may assess the income in respect of any issue which has escaped assessment, and such issue comes to his notice subsequently in the course of assessment, irrespective of the fact that the provisions of 148A have been complied with. Friends, I think that here the explanation is expanding the scope of the provision itself. Section 147 says that the reassessment has to be done subject to 148 to 153. 148 to 153 includes 148A. But the explanation seeks to take away that notwithstanding 148A, the assessing officer can assess a new item. The explanation cannot. You see the judgment of Jet Airways, where Honorable Justice D.Y. Chandrachud exactly said these things. That look, if you allow a new item to be added without having added the item for which reasons were recorded, then that would amount to violation of natural justice, because the assessee would not have got the opportunity of filing objections to that. He would not have got any reasons for that. So that is why how you can allow that. So that same thing analogy remains here also. If you allow a new item to be added, I am not getting any opportunity under section 148A. The assessing officer will not be doing any inquiry. Assessing officer will not be giving me any so-cause notice. Pre-issuance of notice, so-cause notice will not be giving. Though he may give me so-cause notice after he has found this item. But the supervisory check which has been prescribed under section 151, lot of people have asked me one question, friends, that when this 151 principal chief commissioner and principal commissioner have been the authorities who will approve the issuance of notice, is it taking away the power of the assessing officer as far as issuing the so-called notice under section 148 is concerned? Because you see, as all of us know, it is the assessing officer who is defined in section 2 subsection 7, I think, who can create the demand and who can collect the taxes as per Income Tax Act 1961 and Article 265 of the Constitution of India. The Commissioner of Income Tax doesn't have a power to pass any assessment order under the law, except in a limited manner under section 263 of the Income Tax Act, friends. So a lot of people have asked this question, that when 3 label checks are required for that, before issuing the inquiry, before issuing the so-cause notice, before issuing the notice under section 148, at 3 level you are required to take approval of the principal chief commissioner. Does it not mean that you are virtually acting on the directions of your bosses? So friends, here one may take that view, but the courts have said that supervisory check, if the law prescribes a supervisory check, then one cannot say that you are taking away that power. It is only a supervisory check. Ultimately, even after the commissioner has approved, the assessing officer can still decide whether he wants to issue the notice or not. He may not issue, though in reality, I am sure he will not venture anything like that. But as far as law is concerned, the assessing officer can decide not to issue the notice. And here, friends, I don't think that any commissioner will give a direction in writing to the assessing officer that you issue the notice under section 148, even under the new law. If you would do that, then it would directly amount to encroaching the jurisdiction of the assessing officer. And Supreme Court in Greenwood Corporations 314 ITR page 309, Supreme Court has clearly laid down that commissioner has got no business to direct issuance of so-called issuance of notice under section 148. If it is issued, it will be quashed at the threshold, friend. The same thing will work here also. So coming back, friends, in my opinion, notwithstanding the change which has been done in respect of a new item, I don't think that even unless the original item on which the assessment was opened is added, the new item cannot be added. I think that is the interpretation which will come out, and in the course of time, we'll see how the courts will interpret this provision. But friends, this is one of the major change, I will say, which has been made. And another major change which has been made, friends, under the new law is, under the earlier law, if an item was subject matter of appeal, revision, or reference before higher authorities, then that could not have been a subject matter of reassessment. What does that mean? Suppose I have claimed a deduction under section 80 IB of the Income Tax Act, and that was disallowed by the assessing officer. And I have challenged that disallowance before the commissioner appeals. Then under the existing provisions, friends, the assessing officer could not have issued you a notice under section 148 in respect of that deduction, 80 IB relate that issue basically. But now, friends, that proviso which was existing, that proviso has been taken away. What does that mean? That means that notwithstanding that you have filed an appeal in respect of an issue, the assessing officer can still initiate inquiry and issue the notice under section 148 after following the procedure which is laid down in section 148A, which I just now placed before the gathering, friends. I cannot foresee why this has been done, except that the reason could be that now that if I'm not wrong, there is no time limit prescribed for passing the order by the appellate authorities. Like the commissioner appeal, once you file the appeal, in one of my case, I think the appeal was filed in the year 1986, if I remember correctly, and the appeal has not yet been decided. I don't know whether papers will be found or not. In Poddar Court, 3rd floor, I remember. So, because there is no limitation as far as passing of the order by the CIT appeal is concerned, this could have gone into the mind of the department that if the appeal is not decided, then we are not getting an opportunity to suppose on the same issue, if the addition was made of 4 crore, but the addition should have been made of higher amount of say 10 crore on some reasoning. So that in order to take care of cases like those, maybe they will reopen and create additional demand, notwithstanding that the item is before the CIT appeals or before the revisioner, before the commissioner under section 263 or 264. This is another change which has been made, friends, under the new law. Now, friends, under the one important change which has been made is that under the earlier law, as I told you at the beginning, that 16-year time limit was prescribed for foreign income. Now there is no 16-year. The time limit is now maximum period up to which assessment can be reopened is 10 years from the end of the assessment year. Beyond 10 years, you can have sound sleep that it will not be done. It cannot be done. If you have acquired any asset before 15 years, if you have the proof of acquisition, then you can go and show the DDIT that look, I have this undisclosed, he cannot do anything. He will not be able to reassess. The law is very clear. Now, friends, coming back to the time limitation part, Section 149 of the Income Tax Act, which was dealing with the limitation under the earlier law, deals with the limitation under the new law also. First, time limit is 3 years. If any income has escaped assessment, then up to 3 years, the assessing officer can reassess following the procedure which I told you just now, 148A. Though in some cases, 148A will not be required, I will come to that. So up to 3 years, there is no qualification except that the reassessment must be in pursuance of information. What is the meaning of information? Information has been defined in the Act itself. In explanation 1 of Section 148A, it says that for the purpose of Section 148, the information with the assessing officer means information which suggests that income chargeable to tax has escaped assessment. Any information flagged by the board in accordance with the risk management strategy formulated by the board from time to time. If any information has been flagged in accordance with the risk management strategy, that information is sufficient for the purpose of assuming jurisdiction to initiate inquiry under Section 148A. Now, what is risk management strategy? It is not defined that what is risk management strategy, but we can assume that risk management strategy will include what? Risk management strategy would be, I presume, suppose you have not filed the return. You are required to file the return. You have not filed the return. So the department nowadays, as you all of us know, department is now laying more emphasis on information technology. Department knows more data, more information about you or me than what even we know about us. You may not be aware that you have received this much amount from such and such person, but department knows it. You may not be aware that you have spent you have spent so much amount, but department has that information. The information gathering mechanism of the department is becoming robust day by day. So the department would have information that you were required to file your return, you have not filed. So that is one risk management strategy. Once it is flagged, then they will issue the notice. Second is what? Suppose you have spent high amount. Suppose you have made a foreign trip and you have spent 10 lakh rupees, but you have not disclosed. You have not made the payment from your known sources. Then that can be another risk management strategy of expenditure. You have purchased jewelry. You have made payment of hospital. You have made cash. All this information this department is gathering from various sources, and the information is coming to the department. And on that basis, they will formulate the risk management strategy. They will make a comparison of that information with the data which you have given. And if there is any mismatch, then that mismatch will get flagged. Once it is getting flagged, then they may initiate inquiry. It is not that simply on the basis of mismatch, they will issue the notice. It will be a process of inquiry that, look, this person has spent rupees 20 lakhs on a foreign trip. The information has come by way of deduction of tax at source under section 194, 206C, subsection 1H, I think, when you purchase foreign exchange. So that can be a source of information on the basis of which inquiry will be done. And during the course of inquiry, after that you will be given so-called, you can explain that, look, this amount was spent out of my disclosed sources. Then that may not result in issuance of notice. That is one. So this is the risk management strategy. I have given a fairly simple example. There can be complex issues also, cross verification like GST, information given in GST, information given in before Reserve Bank of India, information given in customs. So that information gathering mechanism, that's one. Second is important, friends. Final objection raised by the CAG. That is also now source of information. Under the earlier law, the apex court in the case of Indian Express and Newspaper Society in 119 ITR had clearly said that CAG has got no business to give directions about money, to give information, rather I can say, about reassessment to be done. It is only when information is like the objection by CAG under the earlier law was in respect of a factual error, which was given, which Supreme Court said in 237 ITR PBS BB's case, where the SSC had claimed the deduction under section 80G, and even though 80G certificate which was available showed that 80G had expired, so therefore virtually 80G was not available based on the evidence itself. In that case, the Honorable Supreme Court in 237 ITR upheld the reassessment based on information which was given by CAG. But the CAG cannot interpret any point of law that, look, this amount is eligible for deduction or not. How much the deduction should be given, whether it's a capital expenditure or a revenue expenditure. These are points which assessing officer has to make a judgment. CAG cannot give a judgment on these points, friends. So that was the law in 119 ITR Indian Express and Newspaper Society. And under the earlier law, we know that assessing officers, whenever they utilized the audit objection of this audit party for the purpose of reassessment, they will not write this portion in the regions recorded in writing. Because if they would have written this portion in the regions recorded in writing, then the SSC would challenge that, look, the regions have been, the reassessment has been done at the behest of audit objection. And we had, I remember in one of the cases, friends, related to 80 IB, it was a very big case, where the reassessment was done at the behest of audit party. It was known to us, but the assessing officer did not agree. And ultimately, the court, when called for the records of the case, the court could find that reassessment was done on the basis of audit objection, and the reassessment notices in that case were quashed. But now, friends, the explanation one says, any final objection raised by the CAG to the effect that the assessment in the case of the SSC for the relevant assessment year has not been made in accordance with the provisions of the Act. I foresee that this final objection would be restricted to the factual aspects only. If the CAG's final objection is on a point on which assessing officer can take a view, I don't think that even under the new law, in spite of this explanation one is specifically including the final objection as information, reassessment would not be possible even under the new law in pursuance of a final objection. Because final objection of CAG itself is not final, I think. if you see the procedure which is laid down, the final objection of CAG is put forward to a select committee of the parliament. And after they approve, then only it becomes a part of the report of the CAG. So these are the two basically points on the basis of which the reassessment under the new law can begin. And the window for 3 years will get activated on the basis of this information only, not otherwise, friends. More than 3 years, but up to 10 years, what is the window? For that 149 subsection 1 subclause B, it says, if 3 years but not more than 10 years have elapsed from the end of the relevant assessment year, unless the assessing officer has in his possession books of accounts or other documents or evidence which reveal that the income chargeable to tax represented in the form of asset which has escaped assessment amounts to or is likely to amount to 50 lakh rupees or more. So therefore, without going into much detail for want of time, friends, basically if the assessing officer wants to avail of the extended period of limitation, as they call it in the context of the indirect tax, unless the income is represented in the form of asset and that too 50 lakh rupees or more, the reassessment proceedings cannot be initiated by taking recourse to the extended period of 10 years. Here one question arises, what is the meaning of asset? The asset has been defined in explanation to section 149, friends. It says asset shall include immovable property being land or building or both, shares and securities, loans and advances deposited in bank account. It doesn't give reference to cash. So a lot of people in earlier seminars were asking, what does that mean? If I have cash, does that mean that it is not liable for reassessment because asset, it is not included in the definition of asset? But friends, I don't think, because it is an inclusive definition and the assets they have defined in a limited manner, but it can include many more things, which is in the nature of property, which has got value, friends. That will be, I think, roped in, and the assessing officer can take into account those assets. Here, one question again arose: what is the meaning of asset? What is the when it should be available? Suppose I had purchased a piece of land in the year 2013-14 by paying 50 lakhs of rupees or 1 crore of rupees. And I have got that evidence of the land with me. The purchase deed is there. But as on date, the land is not available with me. I have sold that land. As on date, the land is not in my name. But the documents of sale are not available with me. What does that mean? Does it mean that it cannot be brought to reassessment? I don't think so, friends. In my opinion, the evidence of acquisition is enough to rope in the reassessment of that item, friends. At present, the asset may not have been there. You may have sold the asset. You may not have evidence of the asset. That doesn't matter at all. Or suppose you have invested in the land with the help of cash, not through bank. That also doesn't matter. If the asset is, or if there is a evidence of, say, if there is a evidence of having taken the loan, suppose you have taken loan there is a evidence of having taken the loan, but there is no evidence of investment of that money. There is a cash credit. Basically, cash credit evidence is there. There is no evidence of having purchased that, utilize that cash for the purpose of any particular reason. Suppose in the year 2013, I took a cash loan of rupees 50 lakhs, which I have repaid subsequently after 3 years or 4 years. I have returned back the cash. Pure section 68 case. There is no evidence of any asset. Then what would happen? Here one may argue, if I am on the assessing officer's side, friends, I will argue that you had the cash in that year. And once you had the cash, it is your responsibility to explain the source of cash. From where did you get it? If you cannot explain the source of cash, then it will be added as your undisclosed income. If I am on the assessing officer's side, whereas the assessee will argue that, look, this money belonged to X. From the papers itself, you can see that money has been borrowed from somebody else and has been repaid also. So therefore, it should not be, there was no asset in existence. In such type of cases, friends, the disputes will definitely be there, which can ultimately be settled by the courts only. So for utilizing the extended period of 10 years, the asset must be there. That is the additional additional requirement has been done in the context of new law. When I have spoken to people, they have said that, look, under the earlier law, it was 6 years. Now they have made it 10 years. So we are now worse, not better. Whereas some people say, look, the extended period of 10 years can be utilized only for limited purposes. Otherwise, the general limitation is only 3 years. So it has been reduced. Both the ways, friends, it is there. But one thing they have done, friends, in section 149, one proviso has been inserted, whereby in respect of assessment year 2021-22 and earlier years, they have said that the limitation of the earlier law will apply for issuing the notices in respect of 2021-22 and earlier years. What does that mean? Under the earlier law, the limitation was 6 years from the end of the assessment year. So under the new law, for assessment year 2021-22 and earlier years, they cannot go beyond 6 years, even under the new law. So for the first time, for assessment year 23, the 10 years will, not otherwise. This is one interpretation. Though there is another interpretation also which is going on, is that under the earlier law, the 6 years window, say, was expiring on in the assessment year 2013-14. So that 2013-14 can be reopened up to 10 years. This is some of the people have also said that we are interpreting this proviso in that manner. But in my opinion, the 6 years limitation will prevail, and you cannot go beyond 6 years, though assessment year. For going beyond 6 years, you can do it only for assessment year 2022-23 only. That is my opinion, friends. Now, one important change which has been done is, there are some situations where the law says that it will be a case of deemed information. Under the earlier provisions of reassessment, Also, there were some cases where income was deemed to have escaped assessment. Like if you have not filed the return, then it was a case of deemed escapement of income. So here also, friends, there is a concept of deemed escapement of income. What are those cases? They are given in explanation 2 to section 148 of the Income Tax Act. Explanation 2 says that when a search is initiated under section 132 or a survey is conducted, excluding survey on account of TDS and on account of ceremonies which are held, say marriage ceremony is being held and survey on account of that. So excluding survey on marriage ceremony and TDS, if any other survey is done or search is done or requisition of asset or books of accounts is made in pursuance of search, then these cases will be cases where information will be deemed to have been there. And in such situation, the procedure which I just now told you regarding 148A, making inquiry, giving you the so cause notice, and passing order under section 148A, that need not be done in such cases. Because section 148A of the Income Tax Act, if you see the proviso, it says provided that the provisions of this section shall not apply in a case where it contains this, excluding survey is not included here. So if the survey has been conducted and in pursuance of survey, the assessing officer wants to issue a notice under section 148A, to follow survey is a deemed information. And one important thing, friends, last year the amendment was made in the provisions of survey. Now survey also cannot be done without the approval of Chief Commissioner of Income Tax, as against the earlier law where any assessing officer or inspector could have done the survey. So that is all. 147, 148, friends, I have explained to you. Now let me come to the topic of notices being issued after 31st. The notices are being issued, and even 2015, 16, 16, 17 and 17, 18 also 5 years notices are being issued. What do we have to say as far as those notices are concerned, friends? Because there has been lot of debate on those notices, that how the department can issue the notice under the provisions of the earlier law when section 148 has been reintroduced in the statute book. Friends, here let us briefly see what had happened. If you remember, in the month of March 2020, when the lockdown was introduced on 25th of March 2020, friends, and in that year, on 31st of March 2020, the notice for assessment year 2013-14 was getting barred by limitation, because 6 years from the end of the assessment year, as far as 2013-14 is concerned, was expiring on 31st March 2020. So in the month of March 2020, the government brought out an ordinance. Taxation ordinance was laid down, was passed by Honorable President of India, whereby several acts were amended, including Income Tax Act. and where the government said that if there is if any time limitation is prescribed for completion or compliance of any action in respect of this Income Tax Act for issuance of any notice, order, etc., then that will be extended to, initially it was extended, I think, till 30th of June. It was extended till 31st of December, and a power was given that such extended date as the central government may by notification prescribe. So by virtue of that ordinance, the dates were extended till 31st December, and simultaneously power was given to central government to extend. As we all know, the ordinance has a limited validity of 6 months. So in the month of September, the act came. Taxation Relaxation Act basically was passed by the parliament, where the provisions of the ordinance were basically introduced in the act itself. So they became part of the act. And thereafter, in the month of February, again in the month of March and April, notifications have been issued by the central government, Central Board of Direct Taxes, whereby the dates have been extended finally till 30th of June 2021. And in one of these notifications, though in the ordinance there is nothing of that sort, in one of these ordinance, it is written that for the purpose of issuance of notices in pursuance of this notification, the law which was prevailing, basically the earlier law will apply. That has been explained in the notification by way of an explanation. And thereafter, the notices are being issued now under the Income Tax Act to the assessees for assessment year 2013-14, assessment year 2014-15, until 2017-18, I think. So the question arises that whether the notices which have been so issued, twofold question arises. First, whether the notices could be issued for those assessment years, 2013-14, 2014-15, whether the government has, whether the department has the power to issue the notice. Why? Because the new section 149 proviso to new section 149 clearly says that for the purpose of assessment year 2021, 22 and earlier years, the limitation prescribed under the earlier law will apply. So therefore, in the context of this proviso, whether the notices which have been issued, are they within the four corners of the law? That is one. Assuming that the notices are within the law, whether the notices should have been, whether the notices should be dealt with in accordance with the procedure prescribed, or it should be done as per the old law. When the notices have been issued, friends, I don't think that the department is writing in the notices that it is issued in pursuance of the old law or it is issued in the pursuance of new law. They are not specifying this. And most of the writ petitions which have been filed, I think till date, 5 writ petitions have been filed before different high courts, Delhi High Court, Bombay High Court. Then Bombay High Court, there are 3 petitions: Tata Communications, Armada D1 Private Limited, Sahil International, Delhi High Court, Monmohan Kohli, and recent Calcutta High Court, Bagadia Properties and Investment Private Limited. I think in all these writ petitions, the question which has been put forward before the Honorable Court is that 148A procedure has not been followed while issuing the notices, which is because the new law says that 148A procedure has to be followed before you can issue the notice. That is one. And second, as I told you, that 2013-14 and 14-15 notices cannot be issued at all. And as far as these writ petitions are concerned, friends, they are at the issue notice stage. The department has been asked to file their reply affidavit, and I think not much can be read into as far as the precedentiary value or the or as a precedent. One cannot give any special value to these decisions, except that when one files a writ petition, a new writ petition is filed, these decisions can be helpful in getting a temporary relief whereby the notices can be put on hold and the department will be asked to give their version. As far as these decisions are concerned, this is the position as of now. Now, friends, let us think from both the sides, because if we argue only from our side, SSC side only, we must not see. We must see what the department will argue. When I think from the department's angle, what the department is going to argue, in my opinion, is the department is going to say that, look, my lords, when the corona had struck in the month of March 2020, and in pursuance of the corona, the government had to take this extraordinary step of calling the ordinance in order to extend the limitation which was prescribed. And thereafter, this was followed by the act. And thereafter, it has been followed by the notifications, where the limitation has been extended. The department is going to argue, I think, is that, my lords, when you are extending the limitation for issuing the notice, that automatically means extension of the law itself. If you interpret that only the limitation has been extended without extension of the law, then it is redundant, it is superfluous, it is not of any use. That is one argument, I think, is will most probably be taking. Here, friends, when I did some research into this, I found one decision of Supreme Court reported in 2005-7 SCC page 396, Government of India and Other versus Indian Tobacco Association, where the court dealt with what is the meaning of substitution. Here, if you see the provisions of section 147 to 153, they have been the old provisions substituted by the new provisions. So, what is the meaning of substitution of a new law in place of the old law? Here the Supreme Court said that substitution of a provision results in repeal of the earlier provision and its replacement by a new provision. Repeal of the earlier provision and replacement by a new provision. That is the meaning which has been ascribed to substitution, friends. And when I did some more research, friends, into it, I found section 24 of the General Clauses Act 1897. If you see section 24 of the General Clauses Act 1897, section 24 says the heading of the section is continuation of orders, etc. issued under enactments, repealed and re-enacted. It says, I'm reading few lines, where any central act or regulation is, after the commencement of this act, repealed and re-enacted with or without modification, then unless it is otherwise expressly provided, any appointment, notification, order, scheme, rule, form, or bylaw made or issued under the repealed act or regulation shall, so far as it is not inconsistent with the provisions re-enacted, continue in force and be deemed to have been made or issued under the provisions so re-enacted, unless and until it is superseded by any appointment, notification, order, scheme, rule, form, or bylaw made or issued under the provisions so re-enacted. Section 24 of the General Clauses Act, therefore, acts as a saving clause in respect of any notification which has been issued under the repealed act and which is not inconsistent with the provisions of the new act, then it will be deemed to have been issued under the re-enacted act. Most probably, the department is going to argue on section 24 of the General Clauses Act. So therefore, friends, we have to find out that whether the provisions of the earlier section 148 law and the new 148, whether they are pari materia, whether the procedure which is prescribed, can it be said that it is not inconsistent with the earlier law? It is in concurrence with the earlier law or not? If it is inconsistent with the earlier law, or if it is in concurrence with the earlier law, the implications, the interpretation of section 24 will depend on that, friends. So having taken the arguments which I most probably feel the department will take on these 2 points, let us come back to the reasons which the SSCs will take or can take, friends. Here, friends, I found one very 2-3 interesting decisions of Honorable Supreme Court. One is in the ITO versus SK Habibullah, reported in 44 ITR, page 809. Here, friends, the Honorable Supreme Court was dealing with retrospectivity in the operation of a statute. And the Supreme Court held that when a statute affects the vested rights of an SSC, in absence of compelling reasons, the court would not be justified in giving a greater retrospectivity to a provision than is warranted by the plain words used by the legislature. Where the vested rights of the SSC are affected, the courts will not give greater retrospectivity than what is warranted by the plain words of the legislature. 44 ITR, page 809. Then another judgment in the context of section 34 of the Income Tax Act 1922, which is reassessment provisions under the 1922 Act. It is the decision of Banarsi Devi versus ITO, reported in 53 ITR, page 100, where the Supreme Court was dealing with 34 notices issued under the 34, which was expired, similar situation, which was not issued within the time within which the assessment could have been made. And here Supreme Court said that the notice resuscitates barred claim. Notice revives the barred claim, and therefore stringent rules of construction appropriate to charging sections would apply. Therefore, when you are issuing a notice which is barred by limitation, it revives a barred claim. And Supreme Court in Banarsi Devi's case said that a strict rule of construction must apply, which applies to a charging section. In Banarsi Devi's case, 53 ITR, page 100. And finally, friend, in the case of SS Gadgil, reported in 53 ITR, page 201. Page 231, friends. This again is a judgment under the context of section 34 of the earlier law, that is, 1922 Act, where the notice was barred and the Supreme Court quashed the notice which was issued. And here, interestingly, friends, the department argued in that case on a US Supreme Court judgment. What does that US Supreme Court judgment say? That the US Supreme Court judgment said that a new statute should be construed as a continuation of the old one. A new statute should be construed as a continuation of the old one, with the modifications contained in the new one, although it formally repeals the old statute. However, friends, the Supreme Court did not agree, did not go by the reasoning of the Supreme Court of USA, citation which was given. Then again, friends, another judgment in the case of KM Sarma versus ITO, reported in 2002, 4 SCC, page 339, where the Supreme Court said that a fiscal statute, more particularly a statute governing limitation, must receive strict construction. So basically, friends, if I see the gist of these 3-4 decisions of Supreme Court which dealt with the limitation aspects only, where the notices issued under the context of 1922 law were barred and the notices were issued, the Supreme Court said that they must receive a strict construction and they must be dealt with as if it is a charging section, and struck down the notices. But friends, I must say that the circumstances in which the present notices have been issued, they are once in a century kind of circumstance. The this pandemic happened in the year 1918. And this pandemic, you cannot have any precedent based on the situation which we are facing. This is one of its own situation, where the Supreme Court will obviously take into account the difficulties which were faced by the department in issuing the notices within the due date as prescribed. And ultimately, I think that the final word can only on this matter right by import friends. By the judgments, going by the provisions of section 297 subclause 2 subclause D. Section 297, if you see friends, 297 of the Income Tax Act deals with, just a minute, repeal and savings. When the 1922 Act was repealed and 1961 Act came, then section 297 2D has specific provisions dealing with the manner in which the notices which were issued in the earlier law were to be dealt with. However, there are no similar repeal and saving provisions in the present law. The only guide that we can have is that the Finance Act 2021, which was the bill which was laid down on the floor of the House by Honorable Finance Minister on the 1st of February, knowing fully well that this ordinance was passed, then the Act came, Corona is there. Knowing fully well, the proviso to section 149 was inserted in the new law, which prescribed the same limitation of the old law in the new law as well. So we can say that this gives a guidance that what the lawmakers wanted, whether in pursuance of a delegated legislation, when the central government has been delegated the power to extend, whether that delegated legislation can be utilized for deciding by which law you will be governed. Can in pursuance of delegated legislation you will say that I will issue the notices under the new law and not under the old law and not under the new law? Was that subject matter of delegation? No, that was not subject matter of delegation. The delegation was only for extending the time. But as I told you at the beginning, friends, when you have extended the limitation, can I not argue that extending the limitation automatically extends the law also? There need not be any specific extension of the legislation, because otherwise it will mean no extension of limitation. That will also be taken upon by Honorable Supreme Court, friends. Most probably, in my opinion, I think what the courts are going to do is they may hold that the notices should be issued under the new law, not under the old law, but they can be issued for these assessment year. They may take a middle path. That's what I foresee. But the last word on this particular issue is, of course, it has to come from the and there won't be any unanimity, I think, among the courts also. Ultimately, it has to be done by the Supreme Court, or if good senses prevail on the lawmakers, they may come out with something like amendment in the law itself to give a direction to the assessees. But till then, the litigation will remain. And when the notices are being issued, what we are advising our client is, based on the implications, based on the what is the worth of the case. If the case is worth going to the writ court, then we of course say that yes, you should go to the writ court. But for small cases where the cost of litigation itself is huge, with single bench, division bench, Supreme Court, one should not venture into writ cases, friends, because you can argue on the jurisdiction point before the appellate authorities also. You should keep your jurisdictional issues alive while complying with the notices. But at every stage, you should say that you are doing it with huge objection. You are for the sake of participating. Otherwise, you firmly believe that the notice is bad in law on account of this. So, and until then, friends, the litigation is of course going to be there, friends. That's it, I think, friends. I have summarized the changes. Now I think we can take up the questions. Thank you, friends.
Thank you, sir. This is Kaushik Mullik. As of now, there is no specific questions in the chat box, but I have one question in my mind. So, what should we do in respect to this Bagadia properties stay order given by Calcutta High Court? What at present, what should we do? Do we comply with the department, or we wait for the decision of the Calcutta High Court? Hello.
Hello. Kindly mute yourself. It is requested. Please mute yourself. If you have any question, then unmute yourself. Please raise your hand that if you want any, because there are no questions on the chat box. You can raise your hand and Kaushik will give you an opportunity to speak. Thank you. Kaushik, did you find any hands raised?
No, not yet. Not yet. Can I ask one question? This is my question.
Please go
Ah.
ahead.
Go ahead.
Regarding since this Bagadia property judgment has come from Calcutta High Court staying the notices, what should we do presently here when we have received notices from the department under section reopening the cases? Should we wait or for the judgment, or should we comply with the notice?
You can, there is no question of waiting for the judgment, because how much time it will take, nobody knows. So either you should join this judgment, this case as a party. That is one option with you. Secondly, you can respond to the notice with an objection that you believe that notices which are issued are illegal, and in fact the matter is sub judice. Calcutta High Court has taken note of it along with other courts, and therefore whatever is the outcome of those judgments, that should be followed. In that manner, you can submit to the department, but with a firm objection at every time. That is how you should approach it.
Friends,
Kaushik, Gautam
I have
raised the
Gautam
hand.
Banerjee has a question.
Yes, can I raise the question?
Gautam, I know Gautam has raised his hands, but before Gautam
Can I
finishes
raise the
I would
question?
request
Yes.
just
Am I audible?
just a minute. I will request you to do so.
Am I audible?
We have also yes, you are audible, but
Okay.
before we proceed any further, I would request Sanjay Da to say few words on this section, because this section Ramesh ji has really analyzed it threadbare, giving the decisions of the Supreme Court, 4 important, very landmark decisions. So let us see what Sanjay Da has to say on these provisions under section 148A. Sanjay Da.
After Ramesh, I don't think that there is anything extra can be added, but he has already suggested, as Mr. Kaushik was asking, that whenever a person receives a notice which may be considered that it could not have been issued because of the change of law, I think Ramesh has correctly advised that that particular assessee, instead of waiting for the judgment to come from the high courts, any of the high courts, should cooperate with the department. But at the very beginning, that assessee must mention that according to me, that notice has been issued, not validly issued, and no assessment can be made because of these differences for which cases are pending. Every time, whenever he will write any explanation or make any submission, that should be the first thing. Ramesh has, I think, correctly advised it for all. Number 2, those particular cases, and also I think that unless the stake is for a very, very huge amount, one assessee cannot think of going to a writ court. So the only option available to him would be to cooperate with the department, but subject to the objection made. And Ramesh has also clarified one very important point, that some of us, I should say, were having this idea whether the term asset would include cash or not. Ramesh has rightly, I also think, that it is an inclusive definition that has been given in this section. So always the cash will be a part of the asset. There cannot be any denial of that thing. Otherwise, I think it has been a great deliberation made by Ramesh. My sincere thanks to Ramesh for this. Please go ahead, Indu.
Gautam Da.
Yes, Gautam Da, please raise your question.
Yes, I am now raising my question. As far as I have
Please.
been able to understand,
Yes.
as per the new law of reassessment, existence of asset is one of the criterias. Now let's take an example that an asset was acquired by bank loan, let's say 150 lakhs, and thereafter that bank loan was repaid by undeclared money. Repayment of loan, will that also be treated as asset?
Yes,
Rameshji.
I think repayment of loan where the loan
This is
was
basically
taken,
a reduction of liability.
Yes, I agree. Reduction of liability for the purpose of buying the asset will be treated as undisclosed income for the purpose of this reassessment under the new law, in my opinion. One cannot say that no asset was acquired with bank loan and ultimately I repaid the money from undisclosed sources and therefore it cannot be added as undisclosed income. I don't think that by ascribing the meaning to acquisition of asset, the courts will give such a hyper technical interpretation, because at the end of the day, the fact that you have repaid the loan from your undisclosed income, you are accepting that would be a point, and it is liable to be reassessed. I think.
Ramesh ji, may I add something?
Yes, sir.
If you see the explanation,
Yes, please.
it includes deposit in bank account also. So when the undeclared amount is deposited in bank and then the loan is repaid, it will automatically fall in that category, na?
Exactly.
The
I
income.
agree. I agree, Manish ji. I agree with you.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. But I think deposits in bank has got a different connotation. It does not mean that any deposit to any of my account, deposit by the word deposit, perhaps the legislature wanted to mean solid deposits.
No.
In bank.
Deposit means any deposit, even in current account, cash credit, overdraft, anywhere you deposit money, that's all. That is deposit. It is not qualified by fixed deposit or savings deposit. That is my view, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Any more questions raised?
No questions, no raise of hands into the. Kaushik, vote of thanks. Kaushik.
Ramesh ji, before he gives his vote of thanks, before Kaushik gives his vote of thanks, I have a request to you that
Yes,
please now go back to your book on 148 reopening and see what further things can be done on that book. Kindly,
yes,
please do
Definitely.
so, because that book has been very helpful to us.
Yes,
Definitely.
very helpful.
Yes.
I have also got a copy
Thank
of
you
that
so
book.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Kaushik.
Yes,
Kaushik.
Kaushik, please do. Go and do the rituals.
Kaushik, unmute yourself.
Kaushik, unmute yourself.
Kaushik, unmute yourself.
Has he gone?
Yeah, I unmuted myself.
Go ahead.
Before I give my vote of thanks on behalf of the Accountants Library, I have one small announcement to make that on coming 23rd July 2021, we have another virtual meeting that termed as recent changes in company law, a walkthrough. The speaker will be our very own CEO Animesh Mukherjee.
Kaushik, you are again muted.
Any more?
Kaushik, you are again muted.
I have a connection issue that is getting. I'm being disconnected every time I try to.
Yeah. Now we can hear you.
On behalf of the Accountants Library, its committee members, and all the other persons, I would like to thank Sage Ramesh Patodia ji for giving us a wonderful insight into the new 148, section 148 and the reassessment laws, along with the early comparison with the earlier laws, earlier section 148. I would also thank him for his new inputs. We have been hearing many people, but I would thank him for his new inputs regarding the
Kaushik, again, unmute yourself.
Yes, I'm just getting disconnected every time. I would really thank you for this new additional input that regarding General Clauses Act, General Clauses Act, which we have brought into light today in front of us, and the very illicit description, illicit depiction of this. From on behalf of the library, I thank Sri Ramesh Patodia ji for this wonderful deliberation on the reassessment procedures. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. I am thankful to all the senior members, all the respected members of the profession, Sanjay da, Indu da. Thanks everybody, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Chalo, bye everybody.
Bye. Good evening and good night. Bye.